Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of InRangeTV. We are out here on the road in the Navajo reservation, and we were getting hungry for lunch and figured it'd be pretty cool to actually just get some roadside Navajo food and show you guys what that consists of. So the place we stopped at had basically two different offerings. One is grilled lamb and one is mutton stew. And our grilled lamb here is in a fry bread bundle, and there's an interesting backstory to fry bread that isn't all that it's not all that complimentary to us, the white occupants of this area. We'll get into that in a moment, but we have some fry bread here with corn, roasted green chili, a little bit of potato, and some lamb. Lamb and mutton are very, very common here in the Navajo res. We'll get into exactly why in a moment. And then mutton stew, that is a very legit mutton stew. I think we got some meat, some fat, broth, and then the foil underneath is another piece of fry bread. So, Carl, why don't you go ahead and set the camera and join me back here, and let's try this out.
There it is, I got it. You can try that.
That is muttony.
So I think what we got here, well, mutton being lamb, of course, or,
yes.
or older lamb, right?
Yep.
Mutton is older lamb. So the Navajo ended up being sheep herders back in the Spaniard era.
Right. One of the cool things about the Navajo tribe, and this is just a vast generality, but as Native American tribes go, they're really good about adopting new technology and new influences without losing their own cultural background. And that's not like today they have the internet. No, that goes way back to when the Spanish first showed up here in the southwestern, what is now United States. The Spanish brought goats and sheep, and the Navajo had been kind of a hunter-gatherer sort of culture, and they really adapted quite well both to ranching sheep and goats in this territory and also raising crops. Primarily, they had corn, they had squash in this area.
Corn?
Yep. Green chilies. We're a little far north for green chilies.
Yeah.
But that's one of those things that would absolutely be traded within this area.
So it's not cultural appropriation, it's cultural synergy, where they find things and they bring it in and adopt it, and as a result of being flexible and having the ability to adopt to other cultures, they actually, compared to some reservations, have thrived. Now,
Yes.
Reservations are not necessarily great places in general, but in terms of, if you put it in perspective, the Navajo have done quite well.
Yes.
Yeah.
We screwed them pretty hard,
Yep.
but not as badly as some.
So going back to the Spaniards, that's where they got the idea of being sheep herders. And
Right.
still driving through the res today, you will literally see a hogan, and you'll see a woman out with a shepherd's crook and a bunch of sheep. That is still going on now.
Yeah.
You drive right by it every day. And so this is traditional food. In fact, one of the delicacies, and I know this from something else, are the eyes. The sheep eyes are a big deal. But what we have today is you have grilled lamb.
Yeah. You try a piece of that?
I have not.
It's good.
It's good but simple.
This is all very simple. You don't really have spices in the southwestern U.S., except for chili.
They had a little bit of chili powder over there. They had some salt if you wanted to. I didn't add any because I wanted to eat it in its native form.
Yeah.
This is delicious. It's really simply grilled lamb. The green chilies are obviously delicious. The dumpling stew here, the mutton stew, is a mutton is an old one. So what you do with mutton is you make it into a stew because it's tough old meat.
Right.
And so this is, I have to tell you right now, it's very tender. That piece of meat you got was probably pretty tender, right?
I actually didn't get a piece of meat.
Oh, why don't you get a spoon? I know we're sharing, but whatever. So grab a piece of the mutton, and that's probably been cooked a very long time. It does honestly look like old sinewy meat.
It's a very thin broth. It's a very, very muttony broth.
If you don't like that flavor, I don't know, I'd use the word gamey, but gamey could be used. A little bit.
I think some people will interpret mutton as gamey.
What I would say is that when you're actually out here sheep herding and they're actually feasting on the grass that's behind us in this video, you get that
Grass.
flavor. Well, they're grazing on the natural terrain, which also some of which was injected by the Spaniards too. Some of this kind of stuff wasn't here. They actually started planting grass to make some of this more cattle grazing capable.
Sheep and goats can handle this stuff better than cattle can.
That's more in the southern Arizona region. They actually would plant grass for cattle grazing. But regardless, people that are used to eating traditional, not traditional anymore, but the meat you get from the store, that is very, very different.
Bland.
Very different than when you get meat that's been free-ranged. It has a very different, I've had a lot of free-range beef that has a very different flavor. It's much more lean. It cooks differently. And it has a flavor that's not gamey is not the word, but if you're not familiar with free-range meat, it is gamey.
Right.
Yep. And then, more interestingly enough, we both have fry bread.
Yeah.
Fry bread's considered a very traditional Indian fare, and it is now. but it only is because of some very bad reasons.
So, around the 1860s, the Navajo ended up basically interned at Bosque Redondo. It was a really shitty experience. They basically arrested and marched like 5,000 Navajo, 300 miles, and then gave them nothing, and no food and no shelter, and an incredibly harsh winter. People were dying of freezing to death.
And malnourishment.
And the rations that were provided when they were typically flour that was full of weevils and oil, often gone somewhat rancid.
And if there was beef, it was salted beef that had been cured and it was rancid.
And maybe stolen or extorted or, snuck off by soldiers who were supposed to be dispensing it. And the only thing you can do with this flour, because it's full of weevils and oil, is kind of mix them up together and make a fried bread thing. Which is that was like totally foreign to the Navajo at that point.
Oh, that was nothing that had ever been in their diet before.
That doesn't look like wheat to me. That's not wheat country. There's no wheat out here. Wheat was provided because it was the cheapest thing that the U.S. government could supply as some sort of alleged ration to the Navajo.
Yep.
And this is what you can do with it. Now, unfortunately, this stuff is super high calorie. And you know what? I think getting used to a diet of this did no good for Navajo health.
It's not just Navajo. This is a problem that transcends all of the reservations, and the rations that were doled out to be on the reservation were typically extremely low quality, if not inedible quality. And so things like fry bread became the way to fix the problem, at least turn what you were given edible. If you're a hunter-gatherer society and you used to go out and harvest game and gather food, and then you're given wheat that is inedible or gone wrong, and then you fry it to make it edible, what you're now eating is a high-carb, caloric intake, fat-induced thing, which has nothing to do with your dietary methods or cultural heritage whatsoever. And so when you look across almost all Indian tribes...
This is like donuts.
Yeah, pretty much. But this became the staple food. You're eating donuts as your primary source of sustenance. Okay? Yeah. But you look across almost all Indian tribes, there are very, very high incidence rates of diabetes.
Yep, and obesity.
Bad. Huge obesity, huge diabetes problems. And the cultures were not used to eating this, and not only not eating this, but not eating really bad versions of this. But since all the tribes were given this, it was what you were, you are stuck on this place, there's a fence around it, don't leave, if you leave we'll kill you. Here's the food you're allowed to eat because we'll give it to you, if we even give it to you, and then when you get it, it's bad. Go ahead and eat it, and then it gives you diabetes and obesity because this isn't the society you lived in.
This is an ongoing legacy of what was happening back in the 1800s.
Still goes on today. You go around and you will see, unfortunately, the repercussions of this, which was not that long ago, still existent on most reservations.
And let's be fair. Anyone eating this, there are people today who subsist on a diet of takeout pizza and donuts.
That's true.
And they have the same problem. This is why if you look at indigenous people up in Alaska who have a diet that consists, including a lot of, say, seal fat.
They eat like straight up fat.
And have a metabolism and a digestive system that's self-selected to handle that.
They've done it for forever.
Yeah.
That is their diet.
If you took them and handed them any massively changed diet, you're going to have some serious health issues. It goes with every culture.
But I agree with you. No one should eat this as their main source. No. The meat's fine, and the green chili's great, and the corn's okay, but that fry bread is something you should not sustain yourself on. If you lived entirely on Winchell's donuts from the rest of your life is going to be diminished dramatically.
Yeah.
But it's really simple cooking, and I have to say this mutton stew is really good. I like it.
Nice.
Yeah, and the dumplings are good, and this is really yummy. And the fry bread, by the way, which is not made from weevil-induced rancid horrible wheat.
We hope.
No, I'm sure it isn't. But it's very tasty. It really is palatable and good. It's just high caloric, not good for you stuff.
Right. It ought to be a treat, not a staple.
It's a donut.
You want another piece of this?
Sure. Thanks. So anyway, guys, I mean, this is kind of off the beaten track. Well, literally off the beaten track at a little shack in the Navajo Res. But we thought it'd be interesting to bring to you not only a little bit of history, kind of an Old West vignette.
Yeah, a little bit.
But also just a little bit of tasting history in terms of mutton stew and grilled lamb and what that comes from and how the Navajo had that become part of their now cultural legacy and heritage.
I love green chilies.
Who doesn't love green chilies?
This is like the best food ever invented. Well, ever grown.
Anyways, thanks for watching. Appreciate it.